applause. So loud. Okay, welcome back. Today we have a special guest. It's Godinez Nivon from Mexico. He studied visual arts at the National School of Plastic Arts of the National Autonomous University of Mexico. In 2011, he co-authored the book Multiple Media 3, and in 2014, his work was presented in a collective exhibition in Academia's Garden, Art Laboratories and Education in UAC, Moderno del Museo Universitario de Arte Contemporáneo in Mexico, at the Buena Museum at the Museum of Arte Útil, and the CCA in Glasgow. He was the fellow Young Artist Program by the National Fund for Culture and the Arts for his Take Your Rolas project in 2011-2012. And in 2014, he studied at the Superior National School of Fine Arts in Paris. Welcome, Daniel. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Gemma. Hello. Sorry. Well, thank you for the invitation to Gemma and Alessandra. Well, this is my first day in Escuela, and I'm very happy to share with you some of my two specific projects that I made, and hopefully it can be useful in this school and the process that you are having working together. Well, the project that I want to share with you is the first one is called Tequiografías, which is a project that I developed along with the Assembly of Indigenous Migrants from Mexico City. It's called AMI. This is an organization from people from Oaxaca, Zapotecas, Mijes, Mixtecos, Triquis, 4 of the 64 ethnic groups that live in Mexico. Well, this work, now Gemma and Alessandra will help me to share with you. This work, I mean, the way that I work, I've been working the last 10 years is based in Tequio, which I don't know if someone has ever heard about Tequio before. Well, Tequio is a word in Nahuatl, but is a social structure, very antique, that is activated in some communities, specifically in Oaxaca. Tequio is a specific work. It's an unpaid work that you do in order to have a collective benefit. It's also a way to move in the world as an ethic way of having this. Yes. So these the tequiografías are just emulates the monographias that are these sheets that you can see behind you. These sheets of paper that have a specific topics that the government implements in our elementary school. This project happens specifically in Mexico City. So we have 10 subjects now, 10 themes. But the thing is that this material is a didactic material for schools that emulates the official ones. There are 4 companies that work for the Secretary of Education and the government to develop this material, the official ones, that have just one version of knowledge that is implemented in schools. So this project, it took us 4 years to create with this AMI, the Assembly of People from Oaxaca. But it's very important to tell you the way that we created, based in this Tequio ethics. Well, I think it is very useful to talk about how did I get involved with this community, and in order that you can also think in your projects, in your collective works. Well, my family is from Oaxaca also, the town called Juchitán, very interesting place. It's a matriarchy there. So I grew up with very powerful women. So it's very interesting the way they develop and they act in this collective line of work. So TechU is very important in those communities. And some of my work that I developed in school was just trying to problematize the representation of these women through art, history in Mexican. So the muralism, you know, Diego and all of them, they create these images of tehuanas, that is the name of these women from Juchitán. And but there is always in the benefit of this nationalism agenda. So I try to create another images of my aunts and my family in delirant situations. But that's something I started to do when I was a student. After I started to work with, as a visual artist, I asked myself, what do I want to make visible? What do I want to contribute in visibility? So after I finished working with my family and that representation, I decided to work with people from all the migrants that I could see in the streets that are just invisible, and they are just part of this agenda of lack of education that starts in school, in the early days, in elementary school. So without any specific plan, without any specific objective, I just start talking to them. And well, the first thing that I didn't speak Nahuatl, and also they didn't speak Spanish, so this was just a big barrier of communication. All the people that I see in the street delivering these sheets of paper saying, I come from the La Sierra de Oaxaca, I need some money, I need something to eat. But there's just like, they are invisible. So I started to ask myself, how can I contribute in make visibility for these people? But at this point, I am very naive, of course. I don't really know what to do. I don't really know how to communicate with them. After I end up working with my family, so I needed a group, a well-organized group that already have specific lines of work. So that's how I went to the university, the school for teachers, the pedagogical school, where I could find many migrants from Oaxaca that are already developing works from the academy. So the people from Oaxaca is very interesting that they always remain together. And maybe you know many of them here, but they always try to be together, which is something very interesting. And this specific group, the AMI that I was telling you about, they congregate in a very small place, very like a very small apartment in downtown Mexico City. I saw them in, someone in this university told me that I should go and meet them. And then this AMI place, they use TechU as a way, some of the most important things for them is to make visibility of TechU in the city as a social practice that can be implemented for anyone. And they create some specific projects there in the AMI. For example, they have this philharmonical band of children. The kids of the people that I work with have this band. Also, they have these free Linux workshops, free software, because it is involved with the ethics and the way they conceive TechU. And also, they teach the language of Zapotec and Mije there. So the first day I arrived at that place was, I present myself. Well, I am an artist, I am an art student. I would like to do something with you, but I don't really know what. And they said, well, okay, that's very cute, very nice for you. But here we work in Tequio. I said, in where? Where are you? No, Tequio. It means that's the way we use in our hometowns. It means that whatever you need from us, we can help you doing this project, but you have to give us something back. What are your skills? What do you know? What are you good at? So, well, I like to paint, I like to draw. Maybe I can start doing that. And what do you want from us as a project? And I said, I don't really know what. I just want to get the chance to know you, and let's see what happens. So that's the beginning. I say this because it's very important not to be sure sometimes of what is going to happen with you and your project. In this case, it is new. So I started making this, okay, let's see the story, go back to the story. And they said, on Saturdays, we have the band, the Philharmonical band that I was telling you about is doing the rehearsal. Maybe you can work with the parents that are usually waiting, just waiting for the kids, 4 hours. Maybe you can do some exercise of whatever you want, art. You can do some art. So the first thing I start to do is just to, there's something that I knew in that place that is an assembly. This assembly is not the very much assembly that you see in unions, or it's a very different one, because it's very important, and it's involved, people really listen there. People really pay attention of what you are going to say, and it's very, very interesting. For Tequio, in hometowns, Tequio is a specific work that I was telling you about. It's very important, an assembly. It's an assembly that people can decide what is going to happen. And this also is very important because it happens only in small groups of people. I think it cannot be used in big cities or pretty much a larger group. It's very important because it can affect in the short time our lives. So it's very interesting. I didn't know that also. I just went there. I was with this naive idea of they are migrants, they miss home. No? Maybe I can do something to their home, to send them back to homes, but I was just very confused. But then I start to appreciate these assemblies and see that people really listen to each other. So we start to speak about an identity. We were talking about what is the things that you have more in mind about your home. What do you miss? What is important from you? What do you see your hometowns in this city? So we started with these photographs, a little pixelated ones, but and some of these photos are from this one is Pedro, which is one of the organizers and co-founders of the AMI, and we start to intervene some pictures, and he starts to have some share his thoughts about the educational system. So it soon began to be very important, the notion, and we start to realize that the main problem starts of this invisibility with these groups. It starts from school. It's a problem of education, usually. So the impact needed to be there. So in this conversation is where I started to realize the main importance of these groups. If you have any question, and at the moment I imagine you have several, you can address me. Well, doing these drawings, these maps that the way their hometowns is distributed. And in this assembly, they began to say, no, in my town, we have another kind of organization. It's usually involved with the composition of human body. It's very interesting. Sometimes the graveyard is in the heart of the town, because it's where, well, it's very symbolic. In towns, they move in this evocative place, very poetical, the use of language. And that's also very interesting as an artist to be working with these None of these places I knew, and even the people from the Mixtecas, Zapotecas, Mijes, these assemblies were like 20 people just talking, and they didn't have the chance to know about each other's towns. So it was very interesting. It was like a process from another school, it could be. So we started to create these books, and this wagon, sorry. And after 1 year working, I was participating doing, sometimes I was cooking some meals and to have this for the cooperative, you know. So I was just going there all the time that I could, just participating. And for me it was also like a big, beautiful bubble in which is, in this city, is a big city, Mexico City, and a lot of chaos, a lot of things that I don't really like. But this place is very interesting and also remind me a lot of the things that of my grandfathers, my family. I think the main purpose of this projects is not only to participate in the social and just to have this, implement these methodologies for the common good, but it's also a very personal one, a very personal objective, is to understand more about, in this case, my family and the way, because my grandfather didn't teach Zapoteco to my father and mother. Also, I don't really know a few words, but I really enjoy the narrative and these stories about the fantasies that happen. So for me, it was a way to confront myself with my family and all this gap that just disappeared about my roots. So in one occasion, after 1 year, just going there and really didn't know what to do, I just have this monography, one of the official ones that I told you, of the ethnical groups of Mexico. There are 3 of this, volume 1, 2, and 3. It's also a sheet of paper like this. This is the monografias. It's a didactic material that most of kids in elementary school grew up with. I'm one of those. I really enjoy that because of the illustration. It's very, very interesting. So very funny ones. There are, usually the information is very confused, and also it obeys an official way of telling history. So that's, well, in one occasion I took this this monografia of the ethnical groups of Mexico, and it was very interesting because people start just to criticize that sheet of paper and to be just laughing about it. This is not the way I dress. I don't live in tipis. Huh? This is not who make these things. And this is the material. It's very, of course, it's not that. I mean, nowadays people use internet a lot, but in Mexico City we don't have. I mean, it's usually this is still a very used material nowadays. It's a lot of millions and millions of copies of these topics is shared every day. So that's why I just came up with the idea and tell them we should make our own monografias. Let's make our tequiografias, and also the name, no, tequio. So it was a really good idea to develop. Each tequiografia is a consequence of a specific assembly. So I began to consider an assembly as a tool for composition also. It's like a performance stage. I start to look at these moments very more serious than ever. To really listen, to really record the conversations, to be the moderator of this, have this role. And actually, the first tequiografia that we made, it is the one about death. This is a consequence of a tragic accident that happened when a child from the band had an accident and died. No? So this was, as you can imagine, a very difficult moment. But I suggested to talk about it after a few weeks, no? Not immediately, of course. Just to talk about it. How do we live death in our different communities? What are the traditions? What happened in those communities? So that's when we started to realize that we can create the first one about this specific subject. So nowadays, taquigraphias are distributed in the same, along with the other, the official ones. This happened 8 years ago, and nowadays they are in schools, which is very important because when kids go to this, I believe it's called the stationary, this place of, when kids go to buy their didactic materials, they can ask for a monography about health, and they can have this other version about midwifery and the uses of temazcal and some herbs. So this is very important, and as a consequence of this project, also the Secretary of Education of Mexico asked us to have some of this material to implement in their workshops. This happened only once, but after that I see that people, this institution is starting to use the word tequio at least as a politically correct word to implement in their discourse. So we are still doing some taquigraphias. This project has been translated in 5 languages, in Gaelic, for example, in French, in English, in Dutch, and also in Spanish, Zapotec, and Mixteco, which is very interesting because it has a resonance in places like this. We have shown it in museums, but also in public schools, which I think is very important. One of the main things that I like about this project is that not only happens in the museum, specifically this works exists in these places where kids can buy didactic material, and it only costs 2 pesos. With 2 pesos is just, it's even a cigarette in the streets is 5 pesos, you can imagine. So it's very, very cheap. So it's very important also, I mean, this, because it actually contributes with the visibility. Something more important than the people, it is a practice, a social practice, and this social structure based on this ethics, the tequio, is something that I've been very, well, after we created this project, we had this presentation in the Museum of Contemporary Art in Mexico. So we created this huge assembly, we created one specific for education. The subject was education. And it was very interesting, not only people from indigenous towns and their hometowns, but people involved with education, teachers, principals from school, the people that do the administration in school were just participating, and it was very, very fruitful. This is one of my favorites. It's the assembly of animals. You know, there is a specific assembly that happens with the nahuales in these towns with the Zapotecs from San Juan Taba. It's very interesting because meanwhile people is having their own assemblies, just deciding what is going to happen with the way they conceive the government. At the same time is happening another assembly with conformed by animals, which is these people of knowledge from the doctors, and it's very interesting. Our university also. So, you know, you can see the topics and the subjects of this each taquigrafía, and well. So when people ask us to present the work, we usually create one in the place. But yes.
Can you just clarify? So people are making personal stories. People are making personal stories and also making a visual component of it and a written component. Specific to an experience that they had or some kind of expertise that they have in something? Is that kind of what these technographs are?
No, specifically, it tries to enter to the same distribution system as the official ones. So we have the same subjects, the same topics that are implemented in schools. So we discuss, and we also create new ones, as Tegio, for example, as an assembly, for example. We discuss the same topics that teachers give to their students in the elementary school to create our own version of those. So it's practical knowledge based in their experience, but it's practical knowledge that can be useful in schools, like the one I said about health. Not only the official version about health, you know, but also having another way of seeing. Yeah.
I think I'm not familiar with the thing that you're. Sorry. I'm not familiar with the thing that you're riffing off of, actually, which is maybe also your question. That this, I'm now total understanding a little bit more that this is like a DIY version of an official schooling thing. But do you have an example of the thing that you're referencing? Because I'm not familiar with it in the U.S. educational context. Is it like a encyclopedia, a visual encyclopedia?
It is a short, I don't have an example.
Like a curriculum? Like a curriculum? What is it called again?
It's a monographic.
I'm going to Google it.
Can you help me?
Are you asking, like, what's a monograph? I think they're asking what is Tequio, but I mean, yeah, what is Tequio? But I think Tequio in Mexico is like a communal assembly of.
But what about this thing that they're saying is useful in an educational context as a monograph?
The monographia is a sheet of paper that contains very specific, information about some specific subjects. For example, death, or the way the government develops. Like, for example, you can buy a monographia about the Mexico's Independence Day, or it's like a textbook, yeah, of course, but it's only a sheet of paper. You go and buy just one about it and a specific subject that you use for your homework.
It's helpful to see the reference. And does every school, is that a regular?
Yes, it is a regular thing that happens with the public school. In public school education, they have this material, and they are asked to children to go and buy these specific subjects. Okay. So it's a whole business, because there are only 4 companies that create this material.
Much like textbooks.
Yeah, like this.
Much like textbooks.
Much like textbooks. But we have. Do you want to?
Hey guys, use the microphone. Recording.
I think it could be classified as a category learning poster. Is that right?
I don't really know. Maybe here can be like that.
Oh, these look so
Here it doesn't exist, so I'm just trying to come up with how to explain it to myself and others.
no idea what this thing is.
Yeah?
Hey, so basically what it is, guys, I think, basically what it is that the monographs are like alternative to textbooks. Like you said, like you have a page with one specific thing that it's addressing, and it has like illustrations and words.
Yes.
And it's for like kids to learn about things. And then I think the Tequio is like the process of having an assembly of people who discuss the particular topic and come up with the monograph. Is that?
Yeah, that's it. The Tequio is the specific work. In this case, Tequio is to create a monography, a techiography, in order to distribute in schools.
Yeah.
That's the specific work that we create together.
Yeah. So I think, and with this project, it was particularly focusing on like the representation of indigenous communities within the educational system, like how you could rewrite that with in collaboration with the communities.
Yeah, that's one of our main purpose of this project, is to also to contribute with our way of seeing reality and some other topics that are in schools.
Yeah, like it's a totally brilliant project, and it challenges what is that regulated thing that's in the classrooms already, right? Like you're rewriting what it is that these young people are learning, and not challenging it necessarily, but bringing new ideas that don't already exist, because are the classrooms, the public classrooms, all having the exact same monograph pages? So then you're saying here's a new version of it.
Yeah, and created and developed with people that don't have any visibility in the public school also. Is to create this, so this information is, well, you have to think about the Mexican context, Mexico City. This is very important information because people really don't know, not even anthropologists, because their way to approach in these spaces is with this scientific method of just doing interviews and taking some pictures, no? But to create something in their own social structure is something that is very interesting and very important, and share their own versions of reality and things that can be distributed in schools is very important. That's the specific TECIO, the specific work in TECIO, yes.
Can you come up with a couple of examples of how the official versions are different from the ones that you created?
Yeah, of course. Well, as I was saying, the first time I took some, the one that is the ethnical groups of Mexico. And people, they were represented living in tipis. Do you know this structure? We don't have any tipis in Mexico, for example. And also the complexion of the body is more like an European one. No? Their skin are very white and they're very tall. So this doesn't look like me or my family, for example. And in other subjects, we have this intervention with the French in our history, apparently based in a dispute with some cake maker, someone in the bakery store. That's, well, something. So in that monography, people appear just throwing cakes to each other's faces. So this, it's really, really sad. So that's the material that people like me grew up. Fortunately, I had another access, because, well, but that's two of examples, but they have hundreds of these subjects, of these themes, these monographical materials that every day the kids go and buy to do their homework. And they just, some people like these people from Oaxaca, specifically, many other narratives are not included, but specifically those are not included.
So I have a question about your relationship to the community that you were working with, because that's something that really interests me, and people are probably seeing like a trend in my questions that I'm always asking about, like positionality and like sort of like the nature of your relationship with the questions that you're asking or the community that you're working with. And so I'm wondering, is it something that's like essential to you and your practice to work with an issue that's like somehow connected to you? Or do you see this as something that you could export elsewhere and, you know, use in a European context, or something that you could export elsewhere and use in, I don't know, like an African context, or, you know, or is this something that's very specific to you and this place and your relationship with these people?
Yeah, in a way, I think I involved with both options, because I think this TECIO is also a sensibility. It's a way to move in the world. I think you can, maybe you have also participated in an experience similar. Each one of the 64 ethnical groups have their own word to describe TECIO. For example, Mijes call it Huajencajen. I mean, there is people from small groups and communities just try to take care of each other. they just realize that things are very, like they're working with some specific groups, they try to take care for each other. I'm not trying to, I think I will be very wrong and try to create tequio, to develop tequio in other places, but instead try to identify this sensibility and to share our methodology, our experience, in order to create this material. But we have created many other things based in this assembly and this tequio work. It works for me, for my work, for the way I conceive art. But I also try to identify this other sensibility that we be more empathic and to develop this practice.
But I guess my question is more about, like, do you think that someone who wasn't from Mexico, who didn't have a connection with this group of people, could have come in and worked the way that you did with these people and like created this specific outcome? Or do you think that it was necessary to the decolonization process that you did that because you had this connection with these people? I guess that's kind of what I'm asking.
Yeah, I don't really know what could happen. Someone else came up with the idea. I don't really know how to answer that. The thing is that, but if someone would like to participate from any other place in the world in this project to try to do something in tequio, I think they could try to do it, try to work in this particular way. If he is involved with the outcomes, I could benefit from this. I think people will try to do it. But I don't really know if someone try to create this specific project will happen the same result, the same, I don't really know.
I just wanted to kind of, because in Iran we have kind of the same system also. What? In Iran, I'm from Iran, which like exactly the colonialism actually changed a lot of stories, and people like in different community and different city, depends on where you belong, you had a lot of stories that came back to back. So those kind of mythology, like without knowing what it is, people were following it, and they were like, it was actually helping the community with that, which is really interesting. And then after, and one other thing that, I mean, regarding back to Mia's question, in different times that different countries attacked Iran, some poets, a lot of different poets and literature writers started to write those mythologies in poetic ways, so the enemy cannot understand, but people can understand, they can follow it. And it actually helped them to just follow the community, and then help them to get together, be unified, and then solve like, I was just like looking at this, and we have actually a lot of similarity, like from the dreams, health, from a lot of medicine that traditionally come in, use like a lot of natural elements and like stars, or like based on that, navigation, and stuff like that, that was like, it was in a traditional way. But I thought that might be interesting if you were asking that.
Thank you.
So it sounds like you drew and painted these, but with the collective creative direction from the communities to say this is how we want it to look or be represented. Is that correct?
That's it.
So my question is, from there, in terms of the manufacturing of these new tequiografias, and then also the distribution. So how are they made once you made these copies? So if it's like a photocopier or color copier, and then also when they're being sold or trying to get them into these same places that are maybe selling from only these 4 other companies, How did that process go, and how wide was the goal to try to do that? And do you feel like these tequiografias have to be separate to multiple different communities, or does this help represent indigenous peoples on a broader scale within Mexico? Or was that not even part of the goal? Or is the money coming back from the 2 pesos kind of like going to a certain cause? I guess I'm asking like where it goes from you talk and you meet with them and you hear their story and then you make the thing, and then what happens after that?
Okay. We have this material in stores for 5 years now, and it's not a business for us. It just give us the funding to create more and more. People from the AMI, this organization, they are really enthusiastic with this project. So they take some of these tequiografias to their hometowns and distribute there, just to show them, look what we just made. No? We made this, and we are. But I think this is something that I don't really have to be present to create. I'm basically the illustrator, but also I try to compose and having all the recordings of the discussions, try to create a decent text to share. But we have sometimes another illustrator that can actually help. And this can be something that happens, can be implemented with other people that can illustrate. But I think also it's important, it was not one of our first goals to share this project with you today, for example, no? Which I found very important also. Not only because this is Escuela of Arte Útil, and I know the people back in Mexico, they know about this presentation, and they feel a lot of pride of this is who we are, and we made this. It's not something that you can find in these textbooks or anthropology. So this, they have a lot of respect for this work, and the fact that it can share it with you. It's people's life and experience is in this sheet. So we didn't know that it will be translated in Gaelic, for example. No? So for us also was very, very important to have the chance to confront this, the narratives and the information that contains this material with other contexts is something that we are always waiting to see what could happen. No? But obviously it has more relevance in Mexico City specifically, and in other states they have this material, these sheets of paper, that I know it can be very difficult for you to understand the importance of this material, maybe examples like you said, but for us it's very important to share it right now and to see what can happen in the future.
Can you talk about gathering people and the structure that you created for? From what I understand, you're meeting with people to try and understand what they would put on these cards. Can you talk about how you created a structure for hearing them?
Yeah. Well, the structure is something that is very antique. This assembly is something that is very, they have centuries, these people implement, and that's how they based their own activities in this assembly. So I just participate as a moderator for discussing a specific subject to create a tequiografía. So the structure is very well known, I was the one that didn't knew about that. So I just use it as a tool that they can all be, it's not something that I just take, we have to use this, no? It's something that they already use. And let's talk about what are the subjects that are in schools that teachers give to their students. We create a list and we decide which assembly is going to be about a specific one. And that's where I start to ask some specific questions we are going to talk about health, for example. We need to talk about midwifery. Do you think it's relevant? Yes. And the role that have dreams in midwifery, for example. That is very important, dreams in the conception. And the midwives use a lot of dreaming in their process. So this is something very important I didn't knew, but in these assemblies, we have to make a specific one for the dreaming. No? But only in just listening to people and people with their needs to be heard, to be listened. People that want to share their knowledge, they have such an immense amount of knowledge, just generation after generation, that I don't really have, for example. Because well, my grandfathers used to have it, but they didn't share it with us. So for me, it's just an amazing, just like being surrounded with very beautiful symbolic and poetry all the time. So for me, it was in school, my escuela. So I really enjoyed to discuss these subjects with them. Well, yeah, that's the structure.
And you're coming up with new interpretations, and then also, are you coming up with new cards altogether? And is there can you compare the number of cards that were around before you started your project and the number that there are now? Has that expanded greatly, or?
Not really. We created several other projects. I will show you one. Well, for this project, I just have 2 books. I will put, sorry to interrupt you. And you can, please see, this, we have to share it. This is our book. It's called Tequio Rolas, which can be Tequio songs, Tequio Rolas. So what we decided to do, being an assembly, I started to realize that this assembly is like a form of composition, a tool for composition. And being music so important in these communities, music in Oaxaca is a social work, a social practice, and a way to agglutinate people. The band, the philharmonical band, they play for free, for example. It's a duty that they have to do. And so I start to, can we, in an assembly I ask, what does Tequio sounds like? Can we create some sounds based in Tequio? So I start to draw the assemblies, the way the dialogue flows in a specific conversation. And then we create graphical scores for music improvisation. Yeah, so that's the book that Tequio Rolas, tequiorolas.com, you can see it. You can hear actually, and the philharmonical band, the kids, the people that I work with, they create this, they played these scores, the Tequio Rolas. I just wanted to talk to you about 2 projects. This is something extra, but you can see it right now. Maybe any other question about tequiografías? Yeah.
Okay, so, okay, sorry. I have a question about how your handling of languages, because from my knowledge, like, you know, Zapoteco from one city could be different from somewhere else, and typically a lot of indigenous languages are like spoken and not necessarily written. So I'm just curious about that process of deciding, you know, which version was going to be on here and how to record it using letters, if that was the case. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Well, the people that I work with is, as I said, Zapotecas, Mixtecos, Mijes, y Triquis. But the people from Oaxaca, Zapotecs, are from only 2 regions, from the upper part, la Zapotecos de Alta. So it's from Yalala, at the end of each taquigrafía says exactly the variation of the language. But it's basically because of the people that I was in that moment specifically, and the people who can actually write. There was no mistake or tricky that can actually write their language. So that's why it's not there. But Zapoteco, from that specific version, was present, and many of the people that I work with in this assembly are academics, so they have spent much of their time just trying to defend and contribute with their knowledge and their cosmovision in schools. So it was, I don't know if this specific project could happen the same way in any other organization. This one was people well prepared and ready to share their views, very critical. But yes, it's only because the people that was in that moment. Yeah.
A question about how these assemblies work. Is there a typical way of moderating a conversation? And you said sort of everybody understands, which is really cool, because a lot of people here can spend hours and hours just coming up with ground rules for how you speak and what's the talking stick and how do you vote approval and how long and how do you tell someone to shut up, and it's that's a whole art into itself, and books and books. And I'm curious what this ancient tool is, because it sounds very useful. Also, if you don't have to teach people rules, it's really convenient.
Of course, for example, it's very important just to be aware that we need a specific benefit for each other. Sometimes there are many groups that want to implement their own ideas. Usually these assemblies take longer time. But as long as you can realize we need this specifically, how can we do it? Something that can affect us immediately, I think is very easy that way. As long as there is a specific goal that can impact. For example, if there is 10 collective teams that are developing projects. So, for example, in those specific teams, or maybe all the escuela we want to create this. What can we create based in our own skills and strategies and abilities? I think there is no formula for this. I think it depends a lot of how you confront yourself and with each other, because I think we live in a very individualistic society also. So it's very difficult to actually want to work with someone else sometimes. So that's why, for me, having the chance to know the assembly of this Tequio process with these groups, they already were very well organized. They have, some of them have their own agenda sometimes, and these people usually don't last in this space. But they understand because they grew up with this since they were just childs. They grew up with this being in the assemblies, people, for example, in the system of church, the governmental structure, also the policemen and all the many jobs, they do it for 1 year, it's only for free. You don't get paid for being the people with power in that specific place. So having that notion is not only assembly, it's reinvent the whole structure of the way that you conceive society. So I think if you want to create a more practical assembly, just focus on what is the most imminent benefit that we can all enjoy, that we can all enjoy. Yes. Yeah.
I think one of the, if I may,
yeah, please.
I think one of the, and you probably explained this already, but one of the main differences is that this whole beaten horse of the individualism of Western capitalist society. So as we move through that space of discomfort of dying system. I think that some certain ways of understanding power dynamics are still reflected in assuming a very internalized mode of operation of how power works on each of us. One of the beautiful things about indigeneity in Latin America, and particularly in the areas that you have worked with in the South, is this concept of commonality. So the concept of commonality decenters notions of selfhood. It's not just about volunteering, it's not just about, commonality is really comunalidad, the commune, the commons. So the recuperation of that has to do with a decolonial activity. And so this idea is not even, I don't even think it doesn't often come up once in these cultures, in these indigenous cultures, the idea that you would feel oppressed by the responsibility you have to others to give your time as an exchange for the good you receive from the society. So there are lots of little shifts that occur. I am Mexican, of course, but I'm not indigenous Mexican, obviously. And so the oppression exists within in various ways. And some of the work that we have to do, and I have to do like everyone else, is to think about how not to re-establish that oppression every time, like everyone else. I feel like victimized by something, and we all have to negotiate the space of each other, and we have to negotiate our necessity and desire to be like very strong in our opinions and so on. But what I find really beautiful and like a relief whenever I have contact with cultures that actually practice comunalidad is that none of those things matter as much. And also because the enemy is bigger than each of us are. I don't know, just thinking out loud.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I had a question in regards to I think this is so beautiful, the concept of the tekyo and everything else, but the homogeneity of the culture, that they spoke the same language and their parents knew these histories and their grandparents, and they work this way. And I wondered if there's, I agree a lot with what Lucia said, and when there's a heterogeneous mixture of a lot of people who don't at all have the same way of working together and they don't have a shared history, and I think we're here because we want to volunteer and give in a certain way and change the world. But when we don't have integrated ways of working like this, or going to a place where everyone has a very similar shared history and shared way of collaboration, I think that's oftentimes the struggle that comes up. And, you know, I'm not expecting you to have the solution for the world, but if you had thoughts on that and how it could be, yeah.
Well, I think the sensibility to be involved and to participate is something that we can grow. So, for example, try to working with the homeless people, or try to work with some specific context that you find interesting to develop. Just go there and try to not to have a preconceived idea of what can you create that it will help us live better, as in your opinion. Maybe you just have to go and talk to them, to listen, really listen, with no plan at all. Well, the specific plan to listen and to know, but not a very specific agenda that in 2 months, for 2 months I will speak to these people, I will identify with other people of power maybe. Just try to know, and then try to participate and to contribute with something. I don't really know. I think you can start maybe also with a place that you live, with your family, also your friends, and try to, yeah.
Sorry if I'm coming back to you, because we have like very similar. But go back to your question, actually, when I got here, I started to just think, you're amazing. Because the other one is so loud. Sorry, I was going. Yeah, when I came here, I was so confused about the cultural differences. Like in Iran, the difference is like when there is a problem, everyone come. Like if they have even work, they come to solve a problem for someone because like all the community gather to just solve that. Like they are not individually say that, oh, I don't have, or like even when I'm doing something, I mean, now I got used to it, but at the beginning when I was doing something, when someone were saying, oh, that's so nice of you, I was like, oh, I had to do that because it makes sense to do that. But one other thing about differences was Iran has, I don't know that much about Mexico, but Iran has like, each city has totally different culture, language, anything. But when there is a problem that comes in the country, and Tehran is kind of maybe look like United States because everyone moved there, capital, yeah. So when something comes up, people don't think about the differences. They think about that issue, and they started to just bring their own experiences to solve that. So like all differences will go away. So that makes actually a lot help to solve that, to just focus on that issue and just like help from like getting experiences instead of just like saying, no, I'm the, you know? Yeah, I mean, mostly kind of, but like a lot of things, like you said that it's coming as a heritage thing, they're just like, that's also specific to the city too, because they have different history. They have, all community have different things too, but like they kind of save it, but not in Tehran anymore. It's getting modernized.
Okay.
More of a comment as well. I don't know what you think, but I don't think that Mexico is exactly like a homogenous society. I think it's actually, okay, cool. Well, I guess also to give more context, you know, because I feel like there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of background also missing, because the schools in Mexico are also a place of contention, you know, like the 43 students that went missing and all that. So this is actually super like powerful, because the education system in Mexico is being fought over by people, by neoliberals, as well as the indigenous there. So it's very, yeah. So this is pretty cool. So just to put that out there.
Can you just expand on why it is a place? Oh my gosh. Can you expand just for a moment about why it is a place of contention, the school? I mean, or just because that is so interesting. And
I can explain for one moment, and maybe you could explain more, because I don't. You know, I was born here, I went there, but not, you know, I didn't live there. But it's the Normalista schools are something that also we hear about a lot. There was a caravan of the Yotzinapa caravan that went to San Francisco. But basically, and it's historical. So Tequio is a communal practice, but you have to keep in mind that a lot of the villages in Mexico operate this way. When things went down, people would get together in mutual aid societies, and this is how they would solve it. So it's kind of interesting that he's coming back, but from a place of the community, the communal aspect, right? But yeah, the schools are whole. I mean, it's complicated. It's the dynamic of a lot of people trying to industrialize Mexico and kind of modernize it, bring it to 21st century, whatever as they say. But a lot of people resisting that. But I don't know if you have more background on that, or if you want to talk about it. So.
No, I mean, I think school education is the territory that is the most important to confront with this kind of practice, because not many people obviously go to museums involved with contemporary. This kind, just telling this is art, maybe it's not the particular strategy to be involved with people, but just to create something that is just a sheet of paper that usually can go inside, enter the school every day. It can be like participate in the most subversive way because they don't expect that. But I think school is in the school when my attention is, at least. I am also a teacher, an art teacher in the university. And the work that I develop is always critical about the way as an artist, what we do can actually have an impact in our life. Not thinking about social practice or public art or la útil del arte. Is what we do, where do we want to share our work, and who is going to see our work. I think the production, distribution, and the consumption of our time as creators is very important. So if you decide to, where do you want your work to be seen, by whom, is for me it's schools right now, for this specific project at least. One question about this, or maybe I can go to the other last project that I want to share. No? Yeah. Let me try to. Yeah. First, some of this music. Let me. Oh no. Sorry. Sorry for the delay. Yes. So those who have the book, I'm going to the score that is called Tequio, which is actually the result of this specific assembly of what those Tequio sounds like. So, well, I start to realize, I saw that, oh, do I have to connect my, no, it's okay. Once I realized that assembly was a form of composition, like a big performance, we start to create some choreographies also. So the way the way we discuss a specific subject can be translated in a specific like map. So each tequiografía, each tequiorola, sorry, has a specific code based in each element that compose an assembly, like moderator, participants, silence, lost argument, agreement, consensus, and final resolution, has a graphical one. No? So, and also a specific evocation, like a big phrase to put the musician in a sensitive mood. So for this piece, that is called Tequio, they said in this assembly, Tequio is, would sound like a big tree full with birds singing at once. So it's like this. So this is an improvisation of the kids that conform this philharmonical band. They are the sons and daughters of the people that I create these assemblies. So with the parents, I make the tequiografías, and with the kids, the tequiorrolas. But you can visit the web page and listen to the other tunes. And now, I think we are in our final 15 minutes, so I will go just very... So the next project that I will show you is my latest project that ended up 2 weeks ago. It's called Salón Munal. So Salón Munal is, it was developed in the Museum of National Art of Mexico, the Munal, Museum of National Art. And there, basically the piece is to dance, use one of the galleries, specifically one that used to be a hall for events, like a lobby, to use it as a place to dance salsa music. It's not that radical, it's not that polemical issue. But it turned out that this was actually very polemical action that has a lot of media coverage that I want to show you because it's not over. I still need to confront some things with the museum. But well, this museum, like many other museums in Mexico, in the beginning it wasn't meant to be a museum at all. It used to be the old palace of communication, made in the 19th century by the Porfirio Díaz. So he created the biggest hospital, the biggest mental institution, and the biggest palace of communication. No? So this place usually has, this is the museum. They have a collection of artwork from the 16th century to the early 20th century. So it's, yeah. So I was invited by the Department of Education of the museum to create something involved with a specific exhibition called melancholy. No? So I decided to use a specific room, this one, that it is a room for parties, to create concerts that people can congregate. You know, it's a very pretentious space, no? Very, in a French way, it's good taste. No? So, well, I decided to dance this salsa, to use it as dance salsa, because it's very interesting what dance happens when you dance to your body. You can emancipate and liberate things. No? So that's why I came up with this idea to dance salsa with the people that go and see this painting exhibition of the melancholy through the Mexican painting. No? So the thing that happened was this museum is also involved in a big controversy from several years ago, that because the administration, several administrations of this museum use this space as a party to events, to have events for the private events. So people can pay to have their own party for their companies, and also a lot of unions, some of the most corrupted unions in Mexico. Like, for example, this one is the one that is involved with the social health. They use the same room for having this dinner, no? Very pretentious. There are also many information about gathering service to create your own party. This information is not very well known, because you cannot visit the web page of Munal and say, I went to do my party there. How much is it for one night? They use specific donations, and it's around 2 million pesos, which is, I don't really know how to translate. It's quite a lot of money for the humans there. So the thing that happened, look, some of the university, the Tecnológico de Monterrey, so they celebrate, that kind of people, no? Celebrate also once a year the president and their cabinet, and so these kind of people go there and celebrate. No? They usually, they have this big, space, it's a patio, yard, like a yard, no? Well, they have a very big space, also very, with this system. Very, very interesting. It's a very historical place, no? So it's, for me, and also very beautiful. But look, they create these huge events. So I knew this information before I came up with this idea. It's something that I don't really like, no? And kind of a lack of dignity that people can do this. No? They are just, because this space is a public space. It's meant to be for the people. So this magazine, no, very clear. Just these people just on their Facebook. This also is one of the daughter-in-law of the president, Peña Nieto, and she just after 3 days the disappearance of the 43 students, she decided to go and to be present. And her mother decided not to go because it wouldn't be seen okay, but she decided to go. So, well, I knew that, and that's why I also think about the symbolic impact of use this same space as to dance salsa, which is also music that I like. I'm not the best dancer in salsa, but I really like the music. And I think it could be just so that big palace, and we should do this, we should dance. So I never imagined that something wrong could happen. So it all started with this video that we put on the social network, but I don't really know how to play it. Maybe I will try to. Okay. What can I do? Maybe I need to. What if I will close it? So, just a moment. So, this is what happened. Sorry. Let me put this full screen. It's just 16 seconds, but it's. Someone saw that and decided to create a petition in this platform in change.org, you know, where people can create their own process to this event to be suspended immediately, saying how is it possible that this space is using for as a house for this kind of music. It's very, not only very conservative, but also in a very racist and classist statements that they put in this petition. So we create our own. So the museum, after 12 hours of this petition, and only with 200 people that signed, they decided to shut the project. So this was really not brilliant idea. So we made our own. We decided to make a protest. This piece consists in four events. We were going to dance 2 times in this hall, and another 2 in this place called the Patio de los Leones, which is a very huge space. No? And since the museum decided to censor the work, we just congregate a lot of people that actually wanted to dance in that place, and we just danced in the street. So that got a lot of attention from the media, and here there is only 50 people, and the next week in the streets we were like 200 people just dancing, and at the end we were 500 people. Because the thing is that it generates a lot of discussion about not only the use of public space, the use of museums, who make the agenda, how can a museum change their agenda just because someone didn't like an artwork that was already in process, that we discussed several months previously. So it's not only that, but the fact that the people that signed the petition use in their comments use some language that just show that these people are so very, just unveils the thing that we live still in this colony in Mexico. So there is some kind of people that deserve to be there, and there are others that, there are many other people that they don't. So I translate some of the phrases that people use in order that you can have a better idea. So people said in the petition, how can you there? You're in a very special and awesome place. This is a museum. You cannot enter anywhere you want. This is a place with great artistic value, an almost sacred place. Here we come to pay respect and admire our cultural legacy, not to disrespect it. So this was the arguments that people use. So not really about, but many people got really angry about this. Many people. So this was very, and well, many people especially already knew that this museum creates private events, very polemical ones with the presidential family, and people just go to dance. People were very angry, and also many people just all these people that are not dancing, people from the third age, just old people from a nursing home that used to dance a lot, but they want to see that, for example. Many people involved with this way of think about dissident bodies and this queer philosophy and theory, no? Decide to go and they were like wearing costumes just to dance, to use the space. People that, because after the museum decided not to create it, we make this, congregate this mass protest of salsa dancing, so the museum had to accept the proposition back. So since there was a lot of media coverage and people began to, a lot of also desire to participate and to just be there, so all the footage that I have and the video is based on the things that I find in social media, the people that went, have this live streaming thing. But yeah, I think this is not over, because actually the museum have a pact with me to create an open debate in the same hall room, the polemical one. But and that was the negotiation. After this mess that they create, they decided that they will give me the chance to create a public debate with some, having some discussion about a specific subject, about maybe public space and the use of national heritage and the classism and racism, many of these things. But at the end, they changed the date, knowing that I was going to make travel right here. So, and they just, at the end, well, I didn't have the chance to, but it's not over. I will be, I have a lot of information, a lot of images that people made. with their cell phones and all that. So I think I'm going to use it, and well, at least that's the thing that I can share with you. And any questions about this? Maybe.
I think I just have more of a comment. I've never been to Mexico, but when you mentioned like salsa, I remember some friends who have visited and saying how it's common in Mexico for people to dance in public. So I was surprised that you said you got this reaction, and I think it shows to me how the problem of colonization. So in a way, it's like you're dealing again with decolonization, and like you said, classism and racism embedded in this, and so. Yeah, it's just more of a comment I have.
Yeah, it's very interesting, the fact that when you, because everything just moved in the symbolic territory. Because what people saw was this video of people, these awkward bodies just moving and sweating all over the place. And they said, no, that place is for classical music. I don't really know what, but that place is a palace. My ancestors also their own identity. I don't really know, because many persons involved with the you can call it the high culture in Mexico signed also the petition, trying to. They didn't comment any absurdity, but they said that because everything became such like a battle to destroy the current director of the museum. No? So they have their own agenda, and that they just saw this and they say, how is this possible? But yeah, it's very common. It wasn't meant to be this polemical also. For me, it was very important to dance there, to use that space as what it is, a space for having fun, to use our bodies. Because how is it possible that the daughter-in-law of the president and many other people just go there? And there are many stories of people that work in the, because we became friends a lot with the people that work in the museum. Stories of the politicians, the things that happen in so gross. So it's very, but yeah, salsa music is very common, and we usually dance in the streets. So yeah. Sorry? What?
I was curious if you're going to be at our party tomorrow. Every Thursday we have a small party. Tanya makes us drink and have some snacks, and she makes us go outside and talk to each other about things that maybe don't relate to our class. And I don't know, maybe you can like teach us how to salsa.
Well, thank you for the invitation. But unfortunately, I won't be able, because right now I'm
sorry to hear that.
I'm not.
Maybe you working class so I can teach us how to salsa.
No, maybe on Saturday. Oh well, it's just because I'm not living. I'm actually doing this residency along with my friend Fernando, who is the man over there. We are doing this residency in Montalvo, Center of Art Center, and on Friday we have this exhibition. So this is the commercial. Friday, 6 p.m. Friday, 6 p.m. we have this exhibition there. Fernando and I are going to present an artwork. The event is called Now Hear This.
Now This. Are you part of it?
Yes.
Cool.
Also Fernando.
It's Montalvo
Art
Center.
Montalvo. I have invitations also. Well, because it is we are approaching the end. Well, I will put this over here at the end. Well, so I think we're fine. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. To be honest, I don't have any book to sell right now. What is online is for free. You can also download it. Thank you. No, thank you. I think so. At the beginning, a little.
Access, you can